It's the 29th of the month, and Dan is doing the thing he promised himself he wouldn't do again. He's standing in his kitchen, phone in hand, thumb hovering over the banking app. He already knows. He just doesn't want to see it. He taps, the balance loads. $41 on the salary he used to dream about. Dan is 32. He's a software engineer. He makes more money than his parents ever did, more than he thought he'd make by 40. There are two car keys on the counter behind him. The apartment is nice. On paper, on every form, every loan application, every dinner party conversation, Dan is doing well. Dan is, by any official measure, a success. So why is there $41 in his account on the 29th of the month? He's not reckless. He doesn't gamble. He doesn't have some secret expensive habit. He makes a good salary. He goes to work. He pays his bills, and somehow every single month the money is just gone, and he can't tell you where it went. If you've ever felt that quiet, confusing panic of earning more than you ever have and still feeling like you're falling behind, then you already know Dan. You might be Dan. We're going to come back to Dan's account. We're going to put his entire month on the table and find every single dollar, where it came from, and exactly where it slipped away. But not yet. Because to understand where Dan's money went, you first have to understand something nobody told him. Something nobody told you either. Here's what most people miss. The feeling of being broke on a good salary is not a personal failing. It's not a willpower problem. It's not a math error you keep making. This is not a story about overspending. This is not a story about lattes and weekend takeout. This is not a story about being bad with money. This is a story about a game whose rules were quietly rewritten underneath you, while the paycheck kept getting bigger, so you never thought to look. Your salary went up. That part is real. But somewhere along the way, the number on your paycheck and the life that number can actually buy stopped being the same thing. And the gap between them, that's where the feeling lives. Let me show you the 5 forces hiding in that gap. Starting with the first one, the reason your last raise wasn't really a raise at all. 2 years ago, Dan got a raise, 4%. He remembers the email, the little jump in his chest, the dinner he bought to celebrate. For about a month, he felt richer. He wasn't. That same year, the prices of the things Dan actually buys, rent, groceries, gas, his insurance, rose by more than 4%. So the raise that looked like a step forward was, in real terms, a step back. He was earning a bigger number and buying a smaller life. There's a name for what happened in Dan's chest when he saw that 4%. Economists call it the money illusion, a term coined nearly 100 years ago by an economist named Irving Fisher. The money illusion is your brain's habit of looking at the size of the number on your paycheck and feeling how rich you are, while quietly ignoring what that number can actually buy. You see the digits go up. You don't feel the prices go up, and so a raise that barely keeps pace with rising costs feels like a win when really it's a draw, sometimes a loss. Here's the distinction that changes everything. Your nominal income is the number on the paycheck. Your real income is what that number actually buys after prices are accounted for. The nominal number is the one everybody talks about. The real number is the one you live in. And when you look at the real number across a whole career, it gets darker. Pay attention to this. Since the late 1970s, the amount a typical worker produces in an hour has grown by around 60%. But the pay for that work, adjusted for inflation, has grown by only about 17%. That's the finding of the Economic Policy Institute, drawing on government data. You are producing far more than your parents did. You are keeping a fraction of the reward. So that's force number 1. Your raise wasn't a lie, but it wasn't really a raise. A shrinking raise isn't what empties Dan's account, though. To find that, you have to look at the bills he can't not pay. Think about the biggest expenses in your life, not the coffees, the real ones, where you live, keeping yourself healthy, getting your kids cared for while you work, the education that's supposed to make all of it possible. These are what economists call fixed costs, the expenses you can't easily cut, the ones that arrive whether you like it or not. And over the last 40 years, every single one of them has climbed faster than your paycheck. Start with the roof over your head. A generation ago, a typical American home cost around 3 to 4 times a typical household's yearly income. Today it's closer to 6 times. The house didn't get twice as good. It got twice as expensive, measured against what you earn. Now add health care. In the United States, a family health plan through an employer now runs around $25,000 a year, and a growing slice of that comes straight out of your paycheck before you ever see it. Add childcare, which in many places costs $10,000 to $20,000 a year per child. For a lot of families, that's more than the rent. Add college, up more than tenfold since 1980, far outpacing inflation. A whole generation paying for the past while trying to afford the present. Here's the part nobody tells you. 2 decades ago, a bankruptcy professor named Elizabeth Warren and her daughter, Amelia Warren Tyagi, studied exactly this in a book called The Two-Income Trap. And they found something that should have been impossible. The modern two-earner family, 2 people working, 2 incomes, had less money left over at month's end than a single-earner family did a generation before. Why? Because that second income didn't buy freedom. It got swallowed whole by the rising cost of homes in good school districts, by healthcare, by childcare. 2 paychecks, less breathing room. The trap shut so slowly nobody felt it close. That's force number 2. The costs you can't cut grew faster than the income you can't grow. So far this sounds hopeless. Bigger numbers, smaller lives, a trap with no door. But stay with me, because here's where the story turns. Dan has a coworker. Her name is Maya. She sits 2 desks over. She does roughly the same job, and she earns about $15,000 a year less than he does. By everything we've just described, Maya should be more broke than Dan. More squeezed, closer to the edge. She isn't. Maya saves money every single month. Not a fortune, but something steadily, without drama. While Dan ends the month at $41, Maya ends it a little further ahead than she started. Same city, same job, smaller paycheck. Opposite result. How? That question should be ringing in your head right now. Because if being broke were purely about income, purely about the shrinking raises and the rising costs, then Maya, who earns less, should be drowning faster than Dan. And she's not, which means income is only half the story. The forces stacked against you are real. We just spent 10 minutes proving they're real, but they are not the whole machine. There is another half, one that lives much closer to home, one you actually have your hands on. And the difference between Dan and Maya is hiding inside it. Quick pause. If this is already making you look at your own bank account a little differently, do me a favor and subscribe. This whole channel is about taking the money stuff nobody ever explained to you and making it make sense. Because here's where we're going. The first 2 forces, the raise that wasn't and the costs you can't cut, were done to you. You didn't choose them, but the next 2 forces are different. The next 2 have your fingerprints on them. You felt yourself do them, even if you never had a name for them. And the moment we name them, you'll understand exactly why Maya keeps her money and Dan doesn't. So let's open up the part of the story you can actually control. Let's go back to that 4% raise Dan got 2 years ago. We talked about how inflation ate most of it. But something happened to the part that survived. Now watch what happens next. The month Dan's raise landed, he didn't bank it. Almost nobody does. Within about 90 days, that extra money had quietly found a home. He traded his paid-off car for a newer one with a monthly payment because he'd earned it. He moved into a slightly nicer apartment because he could finally afford it. He added a couple of streaming subscriptions, upgraded his phone, started saying yes to dinners he used to skip. None of it felt extravagant. Each choice on its own was small, reasonable, deserved. This has a name. In the 1950s, a British writer named C. Northcote Parkinson noticed that work expands to fill the time available to complete it. Give yourself a week for a 1-hour task, and somehow it takes a week. Money obeys the same law. Your spending expands to fill the income available. Hand yourself a bigger paycheck, and your life quietly grows to swallow it. Psychologists have a second name for the engine underneath it: hedonic adaptation. Whatever you buy, the nicer car, the bigger place, thrills you for a few weeks, then becomes your new normal. The joy fades, the payment doesn't. So you reach for the next upgrade to feel the spark again, and your baseline ratchets up one more notch, permanently. Here's the cruel part. From the inside, this is invisible. Dan doesn't feel like a man living large. He feels completely ordinary, because everyone around him did the same thing with their raises. His normal is everyone's normal, and that's exactly how a person earns twice what they made a decade ago and feels precisely as broke. The income doubled, the lifestyle rose to meet it, dollar for dollar, then stood there waiting for the next raise. That's force number 3, not the costs forced on you, the ones you quietly chose, one reasonable upgrade at a time. If lifestyle creep is the slow leak, the fourth force is the open wound. Hold that thought about Dan's newer car, because we're about to see how he paid for it. Dan didn't have the cash for that car, or the phone, or half the things he upgraded into. He financed them. A payment here, a balance there, a little plastic rectangle that turns a price you can't afford into a monthly number you can. This is the quietest revolution in money in your lifetime. Somewhere along the way, spending money stopped requiring that you actually have money. Tap your phone at the counter. Click the button that says buy now, pay later. Carry a balance, just make the minimum. Every one of these is engineered to remove the friction, that flinch of pain you used to feel handing over real cash. Take away the pain and you spend more. Every study shows it, and every company offering you these tools knows it. That's why they offer them. But the money was never free. Carry a balance on a credit card in America today, and you're often paying more than 20% interest a year. Sit with that next to the 7% a solid long-term investment might earn you. The machine runs in reverse. While Maya's small savings quietly compound in her favor, Dan's debt compounds against him, in the dark, every single month, faster than he can pay it down. Put a real number on it. Picture 2 people, each with $200 a month they hadn't planned for. The first carries it as a credit card balance at 20%. The second invests it at 7%. 10 years later, the borrower has handed the bank thousands of dollars just for the privilege of owing them, and in many cases still owes. The investor, with that same $200 a month, has quietly built a pile worth more than $30,000. Same monthly number, opposite lives. That is the whole difference between paying interest and earning it, and it's the line Dan keeps landing on the wrong side of. And here's where it stops being about Dan at all. Step back and his bank statement turns out to be a snapshot of an entire economy. Americans now owe more than $1 trillion on credit cards alone, the most in recorded history. That's not a moral collapse. It's a design. An economy built on consumer spending needs you to spend, ideally, a little more than you have. The shrinking raise pushes you. The rising costs squeeze you. The frictionless credit catches you when you fall. And the whole machine hums along on one quiet assumption, that you'll keep reaching for the next thing on borrowed money forever. That's force number 4. The system didn't just let Dan overspend. It engineered the friction out of spending and charged him 20% for the convenience. So let's finally do what I promised you back at the beginning. Let's open Dan's bank statement. Here's his month. He brings home, after taxes, after his health insurance is pulled out before he ever sees it, a little under $6,000. A genuinely good income. Follow it line by line. Rent and utilities take the first $1,900. The 2 car payments and insurance take another $900. Student loan, $400. groceries and gas 600. Phone, internet, and the small army of subscriptions he forgot he's paying for 200. The minimum payments on his credit cards, not the balances, just the minimums, 350. He hasn't bought a single fun thing yet, and he's already down to about $600 for the entire rest of his life that month. Then comes a car repair, a birthday, a dinner that felt normal in the moment, a doctor's copay. And the 600 is gone and the month isn't. $41. Look at that list again because this is the whole video on one screen. There is almost nothing reckless on it. No yacht, no gambling, no secret habit. Just a good salary meeting a stack of ordinary, modern, mostly unavoidable obligations, each one a little bigger than it would have been for his parents, and losing. That's what broke on a good salary actually looks like. It is not a spending spree. It's a slow defeat by 100 reasonable things. But there's a fifth force on that statement, and it's the hardest to see because it isn't a line item. It's the reason so many of those numbers are as big as they are, and this is where it gets remarkable. Every upgrade Dan chose, the newer car, the nicer apartment, he chose by looking sideways at his coworkers, at the people on his feed who show him their best day, their new kitchen, their vacation, every time he picks up his phone. Human beings don't measure wealth in absolute terms. We measure it against the people around us. And you now live in the first era in history where the people around you are a curated, worldwide highlight reel, 24 hours a day. The bar for normal isn't your street anymore. It's everyone everywhere at their most polished. That's force number 5, the comparison treadmill. You run faster and faster, a bigger salary, a nicer life, and the finish line runs exactly as fast because it's always set by someone slightly ahead of you. You can't earn your way to the end of a race that speeds up every time you do. Now picture Dan at the end of that month. It's late. The apartment is quiet. He's at the kitchen table with the statement open in front of him, doing the things so many people with good salaries do alone and never admit to, the quiet, private math, the low hum of shame that he, of all people, with all of this, still couldn't make it add up. If you have ever sat at that table, in that silence, you know it doesn't feel like economics. It feels like a personal verdict. It isn't. And this is the part I most need you to hear. Hold on, because everything turns right here. Look back at the 5 forces. The shrinking raise, the rising fixed costs, lifestyle creep, frictionless debt, the comparison treadmill. Some of those were done to you, the productivity pay gap, the price of housing and health care, an economy engineered to keep you spending. You did not choose those, and you should stop carrying them like a character flaw. They are not your fault, but look again because the 5 are not all the same. The last 3, what you let your lifestyle creep into, what you borrow, and who you measure yourself against, those still have your hands on them. That is the half Maya understood. She didn't outturn the trap. She earns $15,000 less than Dan. She outchose it. She let her lifestyle rise slower than her income, so a gap opened up where savings could live. She refused to fund her life with 20% debt, and she stepped off the comparison treadmill. She decided, on purpose, what enough looked like for her, instead of letting a feed decide it for her. That's the entire difference between $41 and a little further ahead than she started. Not the salary, the half of the machine that answers to you. Here's what changes the instant you see all 5 at once. You stop fighting the wrong enemy. For years, Dan thought the problem was him, his willpower, some discipline everyone else had figured out. So he did what people do when they believe it's a willpower problem. He felt bad, swore he'd try harder next month, and changed nothing. You cannot fix a 5-force machine with shame, but the moment you can tell which forces are done to you and which ones answer to you, the shame has nowhere left to stand, and the 3 you can actually move snap into focus. The next month, Dan ran one quiet experiment. He didn't slash everything. He stopped one upgrade, killed 2 subscriptions, and paid $100 over the minimum on his worst card. Small, almost nothing. And at the end of that month, for the first time in years, the number wasn't $41. It was a few hundred, not freedom. But the first month the machine ran, even a little, in his favor instead of against him. So if you take nothing else from the last 20 minutes, take these three things. First, the factual one. Your salary is not your wealth. The number on your paycheck is nominal. What matters is your real income, what that money actually buys, and the gap you keep between what comes in and what goes out. A smaller paycheck with a bigger gap beats a bigger paycheck with no gap, every time. That's the whole reason Maya is fine and Dan was not. Second, the personal one. You don't have to fight all 5 forces. You can't. 3 of them were built before you walked in. So put the shame down and spend your energy on the 3 that answer to you. How fast your lifestyle rises, how much you borrow, and whose life you're using to measure your own. Find your version of Dan's one quiet experiment. Start this month. And third, the one I really want you to keep. Feeling broke on a good salary was never proof that you are bad with money. It was proof that you've been playing a hard game without ever being shown the rules, and you just saw them. The feeling doesn't get the last word anymore. You do. So tell me in the comments. Of the 5 forces, the shrinking raise, the rising costs, lifestyle creep, easy debt, the comparison treadmill, which one is draining you the most right now? I read them, and they decide what I make next. Because here's the truth, the whole system is quietly counting on you never noticing. A good salary was never the finish line. It was only ever the start of a better question. How much of it do you actually get to keep? That's the whole machine. Now you can see it. If you want to know what to actually do about it, the next video is right here on your screen. Start there. Subscribe so the next piece finds you. See you in the next one.